Hyundai Tucson Hybrid. The official car of the latex allergy excuse. Oh, a rubber? I can't wear that. I got a allergy. Yeah, now you've got 2 kids and a reverse mortgage, and all your stock is in Warner Brothers Discovery because post-nut clarity is as close as you ever get to being touched by common sense. What even is this? It looks like a police sketch of a RAV4. And yeah, Race to the Bottom is about finding a car so devoid of merit that not even I, the world's most blandly agreeable automotive journalist, you can hear me making air quotes, can find something to like about it. But there's gotta be limits, right? Because at first look, I have to wonder what purpose a hybrid even serves today. Hit him with the intro, Nick. What's the point of a hybrid in the age of the electric car? I mean, I know the philosophical arguments for it. It's allowing you to have a little bit of the power of an internal combustion engine along with maybe the placebo of saying, hey, you're also getting a more emissions-friendly vehicle. But at the end of the day, what the effect more or less is the same effect that resulted in Preston Tucker not putting any seat belts in any of his cars, even though he wanted to, and he would have been ahead of the game by several years had he done so. It's the idea that if he had done it, it would be implying that his car's not safe. And by the same token, a lot of people don't like hybrids in the age of the electric car because, you know, it's saying that electric cars aren't viable. So here, have this middle ground take on it. So this is probably just a very long way of saying this is a 2022 Hyundai Tucson hybrid. It's a hybrid. They're still making them in the past 2 years. This is wild to me. And I don't really know why I'm necessarily choosing this for a new episode of Race to the Bottom, other than to experience firsthand what a modern hybrid really does. Is it a car that has versatility, or is it just, I don't know, a car with all the sincerity of a corporation celebrating Pride Month? Who knows? But this is Race to the Bottom. Let's get to the bottom of this.
Hey, it's Brian. The giveaway for the C6 Corvette is still going on. Click the link in the description or go to go.getenteredtowin.com/regular cars, buy a mug digital download, and someone's going to win this wonderful cruiser. Reinvent it for yourself. Don't let this thing become just my Corvette's best Corvette. No, this can be yours. Go to go.getenteredtowin.com/regular cars. Mug digital download. Thank you so much for taking part in these giveaways. You're helping us get out to get to see you guys. Australia 2024.
Oh, cool. Another SUV. Yay. I mean, look, I review what I'm offered, and I'm thankful for anything I'm offered. I check my email, I check the submissions, and this is what I get, and it's fine, because the truth is, even if I had greater variety in my options, part of me wonders if I'd still end up choosing stuff like this out of some masochistic belief that I don't deserve better than to drive an SUV whose design is basically a cry for help. I mean, look at this. It's... Give me weird, give me character, give me unsustainable eccentricity. Just don't throw touchscreen technology and a useless sport mode at the problem and expect me to break out the champagne, you know? But for as disappointing as I find this aesthetically, much like with the Ford Escape, I came into the Tucson with low expectations and found them easily surpassed because, well, it runs, doesn't it? And it runs well. But what is that really saying? I mean, this is Hyundai's best-selling SUV. They've sold more than 7 million of these things since 2004. But you'd think by now they'd have found a way to make this a little more interesting than a sermon on tithing for the 11th consecutive Sunday. This is the 4th generation model running on a shortened version of the N3 platform known as the NX4. Yes, it's technically a new platform, but it's new in the same way a fresh hair on a receding hairline is new. Yeah, it's something, but what is it improving and how long is it really going to be here for? What is this improving upon? Well, the improvement, at least in the general sense, is that we've got ourselves a turbo here. The engine is the 1.6-liter turbo joined to an electric motor that gets its juice from a 1.5 kilowatt-hour battery that all work together so that all in all you're getting 226 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque while tossing aside the CVT that tends to be the hybrid standard and opting instead for a 6-speed automatic transmission. And look, with the absurd markup of RAV4s around this time, this makes as much sense as any other family car. It's annoying in a way kind of similar to what I imagine parenthood is like, in the sheer busyness of it all. Everything and nothing is happening. In abundance! Touch screens everywhere that ultimately lead you nowhere you want to go, to no features that really make a material difference in your life. Just the same stuff that's become standard among new cars today, like the nanny state lane keep assist and adaptive cruise control. Although I guess I'll give props to one feature that I hadn't seen on any car I'd reviewed before this one, which is a rear seat occupant reminder, so you don't go forgetting that you got the kids this weekend while Claire is up in Bensalem helping her mom file for death benefits. Now, supposedly, the hybrid gets up to 38 city, 38 highway, but Will's experience is about 33 to 35 in the summer and the high 20s in the winter. But even if it did get its factory estimates, it's still less than the RAV4 hybrid, nearly level with the Honda CR-V hybrid, and less than even the Ford Escape hybrid, which wouldn't be that big a deal. I mean, Will's numbers are still good, right? But the issue here is that this is a car that demands to be driven. Let me explain. You see, according to Will, this doesn't have a traditional car battery, so if you, say, go an entire week without driving it for whatever reason, you have to reset the battery to get the car to start because it goes into some kind of sleep mode. I almost didn't believe this until I started researching it online and found first world horror stories of key fobs not responding and drivers having to use their actual key to get inside the car to hit the battery reset switch. Oh, the humanity! But, to be fair to the thought process behind the hybrid 12-volt management system, or at least what I believe the thought process would be, the idea, I would assume, is to prevent the battery from being depleted by instruments that remain on even when the car isn't being used. Stuff like car alarms and all that jazz. The way I understand it is that the car will automatically shut off whatever systems aren't necessary for the car's ongoing function or security in order to save battery life. And it's a smart idea in theory, but just seems like it kind of annoys the people who own these things, Will being one of them. But keeping the car alarm on is probably a smart thing because these are supposedly major targets for theft thanks to the Kia Boys challenge. Long story short, it's another laurel you can hang upon the wet mop hair-headed skull of the terminally online people at TikTok, as some guys discovered you could steal certain Kia and Hyundai models manufactured in the past decade using little more than a screwdriver and a USB cord. Looking at the numbers, in Florida, a third of all car thefts there since last July were apparently blamed on the Kia Boys challenge, and Los Angeles police claimed an 85% increase in vehicle thefts from 2021 to 2022 due to this bald-faced, fast and furious, hot-wired fuckboy foolishness. So Will did the sensible thing and got himself a relic of the 80s and 90s that I didn't even know they still made. He got the Club, which I didn't know before this was manufactured in frickin' Mercer County, Pennsylvania. So I guess that's another invention you can chalk up to us in the Keystone State, right up there with the polio vaccine, odometers, pencils with attached erasers, and the musical stylings of Hall & Oates. Now, is the Club the most stylish way to keep your car safe? No. Does it create a Pavlovian try-me response in would-be thieves to test their skills? Probably not. But does it actually keep your car safe? Okay, I don't know, and I'm not sure I care, because you might actually get less from reselling this car than you would from insurance if it were stolen, as this loses close to $10,000 over 5 years, at least from what I could find online. Although I suppose that's still over 75% of its original value, so it's not like it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, we all know how cars depreciate the moment they leave the lot, and it seems like this depreciates less than most, but I don't know. Even while I rag on a car, I can't help myself trying to defend it, because devil's advocacy is a full-time job in itself, you know? But then, do hybrids deserve the defense, or has their time already passed? I suppose we should get into it, because there are plenty of arguments for why hybrids should not exist anymore, particularly with electric cars catching on as they have. In a way, hybrids are paradoxical, struggling to deliver on promised fuel economy because of the additional weight of 2 drivetrains in a single car, while simultaneously downsizing these components to fit them all inside. This also means you get less consistent handling and power because of all the additional weight, since there are more mechanical components rattling around in there, which also means more stuff to potentially go wrong and fewer mechanics who know how to set things right, because even now, expertise is not common, and when it is, you're paying out like a celebrity trying to make a bad headline go away. You also have the long gestating argument that continuing to manufacture hybrids delays the proliferation of electric vehicle infrastructure, because what you're telling people is that electric cars aren't all the way there yet, so don't bother buying them. Stick with the devil you know, or go halfsies and get something that's sort of like an electric car, but with a motor you can still take to Old Man Eli at Brass Tacks Auto Repair and Bail Bonds in Manayunk, Pennsylvania. And really, the things that appeal about an electric car still sort of apply to a hybrid, if you want to get technical about it. You're still saving fuel, you're still producing fewer harmful emissions, it's more energy efficient in general, at least in theory, and while hybrids are more expensive, you might be able to get credits or incentives to subsidize their purchase, right? But none of this really gets to the root question we're trying to answer here. Yes, it's an easy target because it's a family car that's unambitious and unsurprising, but is the 2022 Hyundai Tucson Hybrid a good car? Well, let me don my literary theory hat to talk about new criticism. I don't remember if we've ever talked about this before on the channel, but new criticism is a school of literary theory that states that the primary focus of literary criticism should ignore outside circumstances and historical context in favor of a close analysis of a work as an independent and self-sufficient object, an autonomous work that exists for its own sake. New criticism seeks objectivity, disconnected from the creator, their attitudes, the social conditions of the time, and the psychology of the reader who's consuming the work. In a way, it's saying a work of art exists in a vacuum and should only be judged on its own merits. Value and meaning should only derive from what we can see, like form and structure. And so, if cars are literature to us, then the Hyundai Tucson Hybrid can be examined in this same way. So within the context of new criticism, it doesn't really matter that hybrids don't make a whole lot of sense in a world where electric cars are the hot new status symbol. We don't judge a hybrid by comparison to an electric car, nor should we judge it in comparison to a gasoline-powered car. Hell, we shouldn't even be comparing it to other hybrids. We should look only at whether or not this particular car is a good car and why it is or isn't, to find meaning in something that maybe doesn't represent anything deeper. Therefore, in a vacuum, yes, this is a good car. It's certainly not a bad car, you know? Not to me, and not by any stretch of the imagination. It simply isn't flashy. Yeah, the headlights are cool. They got this wing-like, scaly look that's pretty distinctive and unique. It's probably the most unexpectedly cool thing about it. But the rest? It's got thin paint and an interior that, while actually pretty nice, doesn't feel like a car that costs as much as it does. It's just bland. It's like white rice when you don't have a protein to pair it with. It's fine, you're still getting your calories and your nutrients or whatever, but it's just not an experience you're gonna savor. But it's fine, you know? It's an experience you can live with. Maybe not every day for the rest of your life, but then we typically don't spend our entire lives only eating one thing, much less driving only one thing. Even the guy from Oldboy eventually got a break after 15 straight years of dumplings. What happened after that? I don't know. I never finished it, but I'm sure he ended up thriving. Maybe found a nice girl, settled down. I don't know. Of course, I will say that while the Tucson is fine enough for what it is, it does have elements which are disappointing. Touchscreens just don't do it for me, and I'm not sure that they ever will. But not because I enjoy the tactile feel of buttons and knobs. I mean, I do, but that's not why. No, it's because a lot of touchscreens necessitate taking your eyes off the road to interact with them. Now, maybe that's a crummy reason to dock a touchscreen for existing, but being able to perform functions blindly is useful, and at the very least, it's nice to have a volume knob, you know? But this also represents something of a half measure, an unwillingness to commit to technology fully, but also a resistance to being perceived as old-fashioned. And it comes out in other examples too, where you feel like they're kind of there with the technology, but that they didn't fully commit to it. For instance, the rear tailgate motor won't raise the tailgate if you stand too close, but the measure of what constitutes too close seems entirely arbitrary and thoroughly inconsistent. A minor thing, yeah, but in the absence of larger issues related to wear and tear or exploding engines whose fires are accelerated by the batteries they contain, we're left with annoyances that aggregate and make you resent the car you're driving. There are even some elements that aren't negatives but still leave one wondering why they're there in the first place. Like the diffuse button, which activates a multi-air mode that spreads subtle streams of air from additional vents throughout the cabin. Hyundai prides itself on the subtlety of the diffuse mode, but it's actually too subtle, I think, as Will and I had it on for most of our drive, and I'm not sure there's any meaningful difference between having it on or off. Maybe it makes a difference to people in the back seat? On the subject of things that don't really make a difference, why does this have a sport mode? Can someone explain to me why this? To what end is anybody getting a Hyundai Tucson and doing burnouts? What do you think you're going to accomplish here? Even if it offered more than just nominal acceleration, this car still has an obnoxious sort of lag to it, so that there's this push and pull rattle to the drive that reminds me of the Laredo in the worst ways. Now, once the car actually gets going, it's a fairly smooth ride that offers decent power through the entire range. But it's just not a very dynamic car, and I know, the defense is, why would you expect it to be? And I really don't expect it to be, but I think there are only so many boring cars you can drive before you start to feel the itch for something a little more exciting than a trip to Golden Corral after the chef for the carving station's clocked out for the night. What you have here is a mid-tier family car, something you can lease for a couple of years before moving on to greener pastures once the kids are a little older and you can start thinking about your own happiness again. Obviously, you're not going to put yours before theirs, but your happiness does rise a few notches in the hierarchy. But for now, the Tucson can get your family where they need to go, and still be the car that shepherds you around town for date night after the babysitter shows up 15 minutes after you were supposed to leave. Hyundai Tucson, the official car of high school reunions. Ultimately, by the standards of new criticism, the Hyundai Tucson gets a passing grade, but demerits for disappointment, because there was potential with this engine and this interior that's plagued by clumsily implemented technology. But even while you'd probably expect more for the price point, I don't think it's a bad car. After all, it's not a mortal sin to be boring. And I speak from experience when I say, thank God for that. Fall in terms of where this ranks in the race to the bottom. Granted, it's very similar in a lot of ways to the other two cars I've already done. I swear I don't plan it this way to keep doing SUVs, it's just I do what I'm offered. So I think this drives better than the Ranger, or at least it has more acceleration and more power, it feels like. Or at least, that's the perception, right? But I also feel like it kind of handles better too. So I'm going to say that this is on top right now, followed by the Ford Escape. Did I say Ranger before? I might have. Yeah. Hyundai Tucson, Ford Escape, and still winning the race to the bottom is the Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo and its rattly ride. I ended up liking this car a fairly decent amount while also understanding its limitations. Design-wise, it's very boring, but you know my phrase. It's that if the worst thing that I can say about a car is that it's boring, then it's not a bad car. So ultimately, I will have this on top, followed by the Ford Escape, followed by the Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo. And if you think you have the car that can win the race to the bottom and you don't mind coming to southeastern Pennsylvania, just drop me a line at regularcarstheroman@gmail.com. That's regularcarstheroman@gmail.com. I want to give a big thanks to Will for coming out here and for being such a great sport about all of this. And hopefully, worst come to worst, if you have a car that I don't hate, I'll still end up, making a video out of it and enjoying the drive and enjoying your company. So come hang out with me and Brian as we film a car, and hopefully your car can be on Race to the Bottom. And hopefully you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your week.